The splash is why PM post is on everyone's lips. It's talking, of course, the political development since the last 2 weeks. For the last 2 weeks, Uhuru Raila dialogue. Faced with a cyclic political turmoil, Kenyans are once again debating the ideal executive power structure that will put an end to protracted tussles of every election year. Some leaders are now proposing constitutional changes to bring back the post of Prime Minister. Let me start with you, Dismas. Do you think this is tenable?
Well, I think Kenya needs to have a parliamentary form of democracy. That's what Kenyans wanted all along. Right. And the key guys who are negotiating for our constitution, when they went to Naivasha, they did a U-turn. Now, if you're able to have a parliamentary form of democracy, then it means we are going to have very strong political parties. And strong political parties are very good for any democracy. If you look at South Africa, which is a very good example, if the leader of a particular party starts making mistakes and is going in the wrong direction, then the party can actually recall him. Now in Kenya, if you get to have those strong political parties, then we have a parliamentary democracy, then we have a prime minister. Kenya will be on a very solid ground. And I'm hoping that as we mull over this, we do not have a mongrel, that we are mixing a presidential system and a parliamentary democracy. That if it's a parliamentary democracy, let the buck stop with the prime minister, and then you have a ceremonial president, whether we refer to him as a president, as a chancellor, whatever it is.
All right.
But the business of running the nation should reside with the prime minister.
Right.
That would be good, because right now people say that it's a winner takes it all. But when you've got a parliamentary democracy, then the person who becomes number two, or rather somebody who's got the second highest number of seats, then becomes the opposition leader, and then they are given all those benefits that our leaders have been crying for today.
But every now and then, pundits usually paint our political party system with not so rosy words, saying that we do not have proper political parties. So can a parliamentary system then work without proper political parties?
Now, when you adopt this system of a parliamentary democracy, then invariably the political parties have to work. And even if you don't have very strong political parties, inherently in a parliamentary democracy, it means you've got a very strong civil service, a very strong bureaucracy. Like, for instance, in Italy, there's always, there's a new prime minister almost every 2 or 3 years, but they've got a very solid bureaucracy. The same thing happens in the UK, Israel, India, New Zealand, Australia, that the system that keeps the nation going, in fact, is a very strong civil service. So we need to have those two things, have a very strong civil service, and then have that parliamentary, the political parties where people are treated with a certain level of respect.
Right.
But then one would expect that our political parties are not going to be run by tribal chiefs. They're going to be run by ideologies. And if you subscribe to a particular ideology, then you'll stick with that political party. Maybe that's the tragedy we may have in Kenya, that if you become very powerful, you've gotten money from somewhere, whether through corruption or whatever it is, you can establish a political party and run with it.
All right.
Again, now on the flip side, when you saw the elections of Ihala, when people are being elected to go and represent Ihala, there were conversations from the National Assembly that a lot of money exchanged hands. That would be a tragedy for our political parties, because somebody can go to the National Assembly and then you bring all those smaller parties or even big parties together. If you're able to exchange some cash, as we were being told, although it's not yet been confirmed, then you can create a very fragile state.
Right.
But I suspect if you're going to adopt that system, we'll come up with the inbuilt mechanisms to ensure that we'll be steady and stable.
Mark, do you agree? And as you answer that, given that famous handshake between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta about 2 weeks ago, are we likely to see that post come back?
I agree to an extent, then I disagree to an extent. I think the creation of positions is not really addressing the core issue. The core issue in Kenyan politics is that most of our political parties are based on their tribe. Ford Kenya, for example, struggles to have a single MCA outside of the Webuye Bungoma region. And that cannot be termed as a political party. Let's call a spade a spade. So I agree with Dismas when he speaks about that we need to strengthen our political parties. We need to have political parties whose ideology is stronger than the ties of our forefathers. We need political parties that actually have an ethos that guides them. And as such, the solution does not necessarily lie in creating the position of a prime minister. I think it may lie in the South African American system, for example, where you do not vote for president, you don't even vote for a parliamentarian, you vote for a political party. And based on the percentage that the political party gets, then the party list informs you who's going to be the president, the deputy, and the members of parliament, based on a party list. And that removes the element of feeling like you're voting for your tribesman for whichever position, or your clansman, because even MP positions in this country, if you look at our tribes, if you remove tribalism, you still have to deal with the clanism. You know, we come from the mountain, you come from the lower side of the mountain. So we need to deal with that. And my suggestion would be this: let's not bother with the constitutional reform. Let's just create the position of a chief minister. Okay? So he's a cabinet secretary with supervisory powers, appointed by the president. Let's go to the National Assembly and change how it is the party list is done. So automatically what happens if the leader of the opposition fails to get into presidency, he becomes number one in the Senate or parliamentary list, and he goes to parliament as the leader of opposition. Those are the two things we really, really need to deal with. But given Kenya's typical affinity for tinkering with things that should not be tinkered with, I suspect that we will see a prime minister role being revised, but unfortunately it will be a mongrel, because there's no president in this country who will assume to be ceremonial, and there's no prime minister who will want to be ceremonial as it is in Tanzania. So we will have a mongrel kind of leadership.
All right, Hesbon, let me come to you. It's a very interesting discussion, but many people seem to feel like, Kenyans we have a presidential system. Or is it a mixture? It's a presidential system. You call it presidential system. So then are Kenyans running away from the bed that they made in 2010, trying to create comfort zones for losers in the election?
Well, I mean, the law is very clear that we have a presidential system. And I think by having this narrative about parliamentary system and all that, we are essentially looking at, the grass being green on the other side without really understanding the root causes that make our presidential system dysfunctional. So it is not like, and I think I've said this before, it is not like a parliamentary system is going to work for us. I think there are nuances in our political, dispensation that just need to be understood, quite broadly for us to understand what is it that will work for us. It might not even be a presidential, neither might it be a parliamentary. It might be something uniquely Kenyan. And I think Kenyans like running away from that kind of conversation. And it is, for me, it is neither here nor there. If we can just sanitize our politics to the extent that we have men and women who understand that politics is a contest and there is always a winner and a loser. And if we have a contest that is bringing, tussles every electioneering period, then how do we address this? And because that is the situation where we find ourselves in right now, there are certain things that have been suggested that are a lot more cosmetic, and they're not going to make the presidential system work for us. Especially the creation of the PM's post, and unless you fundamentally address the loopholes in the Constitution that would make the system that we have right now work, I don't think by creation of a position you'll solve anything. Chief Minister, call it PM, you can actually, take advantage of the loose ends in the Constitution and solve the problem now. And I think that would be running away from the problem that we have. It is not a problem that we need to solve now. We just need to address how do we move forward. And I want to believe that the players that we have right now, especially the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, he understands very well that this is not something that is about him being accommodated. This is something that is supposed to address posterity. How do we ensure that after every election year, Kenya moves forward? And to that extent, anything that is going to be created, even if it takes advantage of the loose ends of the Constitution, like the chief administrative secretaries, I'm not so sure that these players will leave it at that. They will look for legislative pieces that will anchor that within the law.
All right. Mutinda, what is your take on this? Because do you think, like Hesbon is saying, that Kenya can sanitize its politics to such an extent that the current presidential system would work and everybody would feel good after the election, whether you lose or win?
I think it would be paramount for us first to identify what the problem might be. Because whether we have a presidential or parliamentary system, after an election, there will always be a winner and there will always be a loser. One of the biggest problems we have is that every Kenyan politician wants to be in government.